Reading from Isaiah 40. Comfort, comfort my people, says your God. Speak tenderly to Jerusalem. Tell her that her sad days are gone and her sins are pardoned. Yes, the Lord has punished her twice over for all her sins. Listen, it's a voice of someone shouting, "Clear the way through the wilderness for the Lord. Make straight a highway through the wasteland for our God. Fill in the valleys and level the mountains and hills. Straighten the curves and smooth out the rough places. Then the glory of the Lord will be revealed, and all people will see it together. The Lord has spoken." A voice said, "Shout." I asked, "What should I shout?" "Shout that people are like the grass. Their beauty fades as quickly as the flowers in a field. The grass withers and the flowers fade beneath the breath of the Lord. And so it is with people. The grass withers and the flower fades, but the word of our God stands forever. O Zion, messenger of good news, shout from the mountaintops. Shout it louder, O Jerusalem. Shout and do not be afraid. Tell the towns of Judah, your God is coming. Yes, the sovereign Lord is coming in power. He will rule with a powerful arm. See, he brings his reward with him as he comes. He will feed the flock like a shepherd. He will carry the lambs in his arms, holding them close to his heart. He will gently lead the mother sheep with their young. Continuing from verse 25. To whom will you compare me? Who is my equal? Asked the Holy One. Look up into the heavens. Who created the stars? He brings them out like an army, one after another, calling each by its name. Because of his great power and incomparable strength, not a single one is missing. O Jacob, how can you say the Lord does not see your troubles? O Israel, how can you say God ignores your rights? Have you never heard? Have you never understood? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of all the earth. He never grows weak or weary. No one can measure the depths of his understanding. He gives power to the weak and strength to the powerless. Even youths will become weak and tired. The young men will fall in exhaustion. But those who trust in the Lord will find new strength. They will soar high on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not faint.
Chronic pain is terrible. I don't know that from personal experience, but anyone that I've talked to that suffered from chronic pain or anything I've read about it, it is so difficult. You've got all that, you have all of the pain, the discomfort. Even with that discomfort, you have limitation, but maybe one of the hardest things is the emotional toil. Because people can endure a fair amount of hardship when there's an end in sight. But when it stretches on without relief or without insight about what's going on, it can be debilitating. This morning we're looking at a passage of Scripture that addresses the ache of a nation, the ache of the people of Israel who endured that ache, that chronic pain for over 300 years. That's pretty sobering. For some 300 plus years, the nation of Israel suffered both political and spiritual decline. That time they had 20 rulers, that's just the southern kingdom. They had 20 rulers, 11 of them were described as evil. 4 were a mixture of good and evil, and only 5 were good. Can you imagine sitting in the social studies class in high school and they're going through the kings, and that was a terrible king, and that one was bad, and that one was good. Oh, no, he isn't. He turned bad halfway through, and that one was bad. Oh, we did have one good, and then a bad one. Can you imagine how depressing that would be? During that time, their enemies grew increasingly powerful. Enemies grew increasingly powerful, and they become increasingly disconnected from God. And then, as we were talking about last week, the worst thing that they could ever imagine happening happened. They were conquered. They were sent into exile into Babylon. So last week we looked at the prophet Jeremiah, and his encouragement to those who were in exile, calling them to settle down, trust in the Lord, even when they're in circumstances that they didn't want to be in. Now, over 100 years before the prophet Jeremiah was writing, there was another prophet, Isaiah. He also predicted the exile. And when you read the book of Isaiah, you're reading through this and you get to chapter 40 and the tone changes. The focus changes, and even it seems like the audience changes. Instead of addressing those who are in danger of exile, he seems to be writing those who are returning from the exile. He's no longer warning of judgment, but the tone turns to one of hope. Now, when you read, the scholars are divided on this. Some, and these are all good evangelical Bible-believing scholars, some believe that it was written by Isaiah, the last half, and some believe that maybe it was written by someone other than Isaiah. Maybe it was written by some of the disciples of Isaiah, because Isaiah, we're told in 8:16 and 38 that the prophet had been instructed to seal up God's instruction for those who would come after, there was disciples. And so it may have been that Isaiah wrote it, it may have been that others, but we know that it is God's word to us. It's part of God's revealed word to us. And the scholars, as they look at it, whichever view they support of who actually wrote it, they believe that it's God's words of hope to his discouraged people. And it's an incredible vision of hope. So there's a series in which I've selected 7 highlights that we're going to explore. And that series goes from now through to about the middle of March. Isaiah 40 this week, comfort and strength. 42 and 43, I'm picking 2 chapters there about something new. A new servant talking about healing, and Pastor Jeremiah is going to bring that message for us. Delight, Isaiah 50. Don't miss Isaiah 55. Isaiah 55 is an incredible chapter, one of my favorites. Isaiah 61, righteousness in full bloom. The holy mountain in Isaiah 65, and then Isaiah 66, enduring peace. Incredible words of hope, and I had to sort of just pick some because there's so many in that whole section of Isaiah. We need that encouraging word. Now, maybe we cannot fully empathize with chronic pain for 300 plus years. But I think we understand the ongoing ache of anxiety and worry that has grown into this unrelenting ache even in the last few decades. Many of us grew up in a time when there was increasing prosperity and optimism. From the time of World War II to about 2000, things were looking pretty good. Global economies were growing and nations were getting along. Oh, there had been some bumps in the road, some conflicts that Western nations were drawn into, whether that be Korea or Vietnam. But even by the early 90s, the Cold War was diminishing. The USSR had split up. The Berlin Wall came down, and countries that had been communist were becoming independent, and some of them even democratic. Things were looking pretty good. But also in the 1990s, some trouble was brewing. Western troops were drawn into conflict in the first Gulf War from 1990 to 92. And then at the turn of the century, not long after that, September 11th, 2001. The World Trade Centers came down as planes crashed into them that hijackers had taken and flown into those towers. And that led to the second Gulf War in 2003 to 2011. And then financially, there was a dot-com crash of 2003. 2008, the global financial crisis when the subprime mortgage market collapsed. And then there were trade issues. Trade agreements between countries seem to be in jeopardy. Wars have erupted, and world leaders are now openly distrustful of one another. And the tone has shifted. It shifted from optimism. It's being overshadowed by headlines of doom. Add to that the instant access we have to news, and add to that the media algorithms that amplify anything that's negative. And people are increasingly nervous and frightened and negative and hostile. Politics is angry and polarized, and the world is increasingly secular, increasingly disconnected from God. Our society is suffering from a growing ache. Something isn't right, and people are nervous and angry and grumpy. And it's becoming a chronic pain. Aren't you glad you came this morning? There's soup. There's soup. We have hope. There's soup. All right. But as people of God, our outlook should be different. We don't need to be shaped by this world around us. We need to be shaped by God's word. We understand that there's reasons why people around us may be negative, but we've got a different outlook because we can live with hope. Every once in a while, you get a bright spot. It's unexpected. I got one this week. Whatever my media algorithm is, they fed me a YouTube video from none other than it was an interview on CBC of former Prime Minister Jean Chrétien. And he was talking about the world and what's happening in the world and some of the very negative things that are happening. They're asking about them, and he was saying that, yeah, there are some very real problems in the world right now because you have leaders who are abandoning the rule of law. But he said, I'm not pessimistic. He said, these leaders, they won't be around forever. And then he said, and you look at the past, he said, I remember times we faced all sorts of obstacles and we didn't know how we were going to get around them or over them or under them, but somehow we did. We managed. We'll be okay. And I thought that was not bad from someone that's 92 years old and looking at the world and going, that was actually some very encouraging kind of thing. But that was encouraging, but even more than something like that is the vision of Isaiah. In the words of the prophet, the people who experienced the worst that could happen, they discovered a powerful theme, the theme of hope. So we're going to dive into Isaiah 40, a beautiful passage. And something about a passage here that paints such a beautiful picture, I want to actually read through the whole thing slowly with some interjection between, but I'm trying to keep my words a little fewer because sometimes you wreck a picture by describing it too much. But there are in Isaiah 43 snapshots that I want to look at. So let's jump into that. The first is a message to the powerless. And we read all of that in Isaiah 40, 1 through 11. To those who have experienced long stretches of distress and disappointment, the prophet says, get ready. Get ready. The gloomy days will soon be gone. Your sin is forgiven and the punishment is over. We see that in verses 1 through 5. Comfort, comfort, says your God. Speak tenderly to Jerusalem. Tell her that her sad days are gone, her sins are pardoned. Yes, the Lord has punished her twice for all her sins. Listen. It's the voice of someone coming, shouting, clear the way through the wilderness for the Lord. Make straight a highway through the wasteland for our God. Fill in the valleys, level the mountains and hills, straighten the curves, smooth out the rough places. Then the glory of the Lord will be revealed, and all people will see it together. The Lord has spoken. We know this passage. It was quoted as John the Baptist was beginning his ministry, announcing the arrival of Jesus. Notice it says that all people will see the glory of the Lord together. And I wonder what he's talking about. He doesn't elaborate on that, but as you look at the vision further in Isaiah, there's a lot more about the nations. It goes on and says, he knows how fragile and helpless people are. The voice said, shout. I asked, what should I shout? Shout that people are like grass. Their beauty fades as quickly as the flowers in a field. The grass withers and the flowers fade and the breath, but beneath the breath of the Lord, and so it is with his people. The grass withers and the flowers fade, but the word of the Lord stands forever. People fade. People wither. That's a reality in our lives. And it might be in your younger years, in your young adult years. You might have some time, a period of time where it seems like the wind's at your back and you could take on the world and everything's going well. But it doesn't take too long before the difficulties and the disappointments and the injuries and whatever else begins to stack up. And suddenly you realize you're facing a headwind. Things are a little harder. When you were younger, you could learn more easily. You could move more easily. You could recover more easily. But everything just gets a little harder and harder. I see some of you nodding. Oh, yeah, that's certainly how it goes. And that would be a very depressing reality. except for one thing. The word of the Lord stands forever. The eternal God speaks to us, and he invites us to know him. The eternal God invites us to know him. That's incredible. To enter into a relationship with him that will last. He knows how fragile we are. He knows how helpless we are. Yet we bear his image, and we're invited into his eternal presence. That's an incredible hope. In this picture, Message to the Powerless, he goes on and talk about powerful tenderness. Listen, O Zion, messenger of good news, shout from the mountaintop, shout it louder. O Jerusalem, shout, do not be afraid. Tell the towns of Judah, your God is coming. Yes, the sovereign Lord is coming in power. He will rule with a powerful arm. See, he brings his reward with him as he comes. And at that point, if you stop there, everybody listening to that, they would think of a king robed in his battle armor, coming with a sword in his hand, ready to conquer. But that's not the image. The image shifts. He'll feed his flock like a shepherd. He will carry his lambs in arms, holding them close to his heart. He will gently lead the mother sheep with their young. That shift seemed strange, because when they thought of the Lord coming in power, they thought of a king. They thought of King David. All through the Psalms, it talks about God giving the king the ability to defend himself from his enemies. But something's changed. The picture isn't of a king going out to war. It's about a force. It's something more powerful than just the force of violence. It's gentleness and tenderness. Now, that theme isn't developed further here, but it's picked up later in Isaiah. It's taught by Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount. It's taught by the Apostle Paul when he's talking about the fruit of the Spirit. What a picture. The Lord is coming. He's coming with power, but that power is going to be so different than anything that we're used to, anything that the kingdoms of this world wield. Gentleness and tenderness. Well, that's one snapshot to the powerless. And then the picture shifts from us and our condition and this message that we desperately need of hope that God is coming in power. The snapshot moves to the powerful one. And we see that from 40 verses 12 to 14. He has no rivals. Who else has held the oceans in his hand? Verse 12. Who has measured off the heavens with his fingers? Who else knows the weight of the earth or has weighed the mountains and hills on a scale? Amazing picture of the grandeur of God. The water in all the oceans held in his cupped hand. Think of that next time you're washing your hands. Just put a little water in there and say, to God, all the water in the oceans is just that big. What a picture. All the stars in the galaxy, he measured with just a few hand spans. There's the galaxy, that much. And he knows how heavy the earth is. He dropped it on the mountain ranges on a scale. Yep, okay, there's the Rocky Mountains. There's just, boom, there they are. What a picture of grandeur. This poetic picture. The heavens and the earth are the size of a child's play set to him. Verse 13, who's able to advise the Spirit of the Lord, who knows enough to give him advice or teach him? Has the Lord ever needed anyone's advice? Does he need instruction about what is good? Did someone teach him what is right or show him the path of justice? One of the attributes of God that we really don't talk about enough or give enough attention to is that God is self-sufficient. He's the creator, but he doesn't need his creation. He doesn't need anything from us. He doesn't need our opinion. He doesn't need our advice. He doesn't need our help. He doesn't need our sacrifices. He's existed before all things, and everything else that exists comes from his creative ability, his creative word. He didn't have to take a course on how do you build a universe. He knew it. He dwarfs the nations, verse 15 to 17. For all the nations in the world are but a drop in the bucket. They're nothing more than dust on the scales. Picks up the whole earth as though it were a grain of sand. All the wood in Lebanon's forests and all Lebanon's animals would not be enough to make a burnt offering worthy of our God. The nations of the world are worth nothing to him. In his eyes, they count for less than nothing, mere emptiness and froth. You see, these nations that seem so impressive to us now, they're as insignificant as dust. He just weighed the mountains on a scale. But the nations that seem so powerful, they're just the dust that he brushes off the scale before he puts the mountains on. Isn't that quite the picture? God holds the oceans in his hands, but the nations are just one little drop. Not even the water that's cupped in his hands. That's how small they are. You could chop down all the forests in the world and it wouldn't be enough for a fire that would really honor him properly. And he holds the whole earth in his hands, in his fingertips, like a single grain of sand. What a picture. What a picture of God's grandeur. It's so beyond anything that we could imagine. And some try to make idols. He's beyond comparison. Verse 18, whom can you compare God? What image can you find to resemble him? Can he be compared to an idol formed in a mold, overlaid with gold and decorated with silver chains? Or if people are too poor for that, they might at least choose wood that won't decay and a skilled craftsman to carve an image that won't fall down. He's so beyond anything that we could picture, anything that we could create, anything that we could shape. And those who try to somehow represent God, they do their best to make an idol look good by covering it in gold or silver. If that's too expensive, at least to use some sturdy wood and hire a good craftsman. Nice try. It's not even anywhere close. Verse 21 to 24 talks about him being the judge above all. Verse 21, haven't you heard? Don't you understand? Are you deaf to the words of God, the words he gave before the world began? Are you so ignorant? God sits above the circle of the earth. The people below seem like grasshoppers to him. He spreads out the heavens like the curtain and makes his tent from them. The size and beauty and complexity of the world declare the glory of God who made them. He's beyond our grandest imagination, our most complex scientific calculations. He's beyond all of that. And the poetry continues with an illustration we probably understand, because if you've gone to Toronto and got up on the CN Tower, or maybe Seattle, the Space Needle, and you get up there and you look through the glass floor that they have at the CN Tower, and you look down and you see all the little buildings and the little toy match cars and the people scurrying around like ants. That's what it's like to God. He looks down at the earth and they're like grasshoppers. Verse 23. He judges the great people of the world and brings them all to nothing. They hardly get started, barely taking root when he blows on them, and they wither, the wind carries them off like chaff. Now, not wrong time of the year, I wanted to have some chaff to actually be able to demonstrate this, but you're going to have to use your imagination. Think of some of those great leaders through the years, throughout the ages. Anybody get the names of pharaohs of Egypt? Can you think of a name? Any? Ramses. Well, these are powerful people. Can't you remember their names? They were important, powerful people. Ramses, King Tut. Yeah, some of those. How about the Roman emperors? Can you think of any Roman emperors? Nero, Caesar. You got a few of those. Oh, you're a little better on those. That's pretty good. How about a Greek ancient leader? Anybody? Alexander the Great. Very good. You're doing well on that. So let's add those in the palm of your hand. You got some, you got the Roman emperors, and you have all the pharaohs. So put them on there. Make sure you get them all there. And then you get the ancient Greek leaders. How about emperors of China? I mean, that's like a billion people there. How about the emperors through the ages? Who's the important emperors of China? Mao Zedong and some of the people through the years. So let's put them on that, add them to that. And how about India? Great leaders of India. Gandhi? Anyone get older than Gandhi? I had to look this up. I've got an inside source, though, that could help me, with Pastor Jeremiah. And so Arya Bhatta, the inventor of zero. And another one is Akbar, whose grandson Shah Jahan. I got to be careful. I got all these nations in my hand here. We don't want to drop them, right? Shah Jahan, the one who built the Taj Mahal. All of these important leaders, all of these nations, all of these leaders. And how about all the leaders in the world wars? Who were the key players in the two world wars? Yeah, you got them. All of those people, the Hitlers and the Churchills and all of those, put them all there. And Roosevelt, put them all in the palm of your hand. And God sees all of them. And they're gone. So next time, when there's that distressing headline about some leaders in the world that are rattling their sabers against one another, and you're going, oh no, what's going to happen? Go out and find some dried leaves or some chaff, crumple them up and put them in your hand. And remember God's perspective. Remember that they're like chaff. But there is a God who is above all and over all and in all and through all. Then it goes on and says, who made the stars? To whom will you compare me? Verse 25. Who is my equal? Asks the Holy One. Look up into the heavens. Who created the stars? He brings them out like an army, one after the other, calling each one by name. Because of his great power and his incomparable strength, not a single one is missing. So before telescopes, there were about 5,000 to 6,000 stars that you could see with the unaided eye. And then they started to get some modest, lenses and telescopes and things like that. And very steadily, that number rose into the millions and then the billions. And now scientists, with all the things that they've looked at, they make an estimate. And their estimate is, I can't even envision this number, 200 billion trillion. So a billion, you get 1,000 billions and you get a trillion. And then you get 200 billion of those trillions. Yeah. And he names them all and calls them out by name. That takes a long time. That's incredible. An incredible snapshot of the God in whom we trust. The God who says, I'm coming to help, to bring you comfort. So you have those two snapshots, and they're really in sharp contrast. Our frailty, our desperation and need to a God who is incredibly powerful. It reminds me of what's said in Psalm 8. When I consider the heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon, the stars, which you've set in place, what is mankind that you are mindful of them, and human beings that you care for them? It almost doesn't make sense. A God who is so incredibly marvelous and grand, and us who are so incredibly minuscule, but not insignificant, because God chose to make us in his image. And even when mankind went horribly awry, pushing God out and saying, no, we're going to try this on our own, God continued to reach down and said, you really need my help. Would you like my help? And mankind goes, no, we've got it. We're doing fine. No, we're not. History has proven that time and time again. We really need his help. But he continues to reach down and said, would you like some help? He chose to reach down to us. And this leads to the third snapshot, and that's the power transfer in verse 27 to 31. And we'll even put this on, no, I won't put all of it on the screen, some of it. Oh, Jacob, how can you say the Lord does not see your troubles? Oh, Israel, how can you say God ignores your rights? Interesting, Jacob and Israel. Jacob, the one wrestling with God, Israel, one whose name, the same guy whose name had been changed to say that he'd found some degree of understanding or bigger picture of God. 28. Have you never heard? Have you never understood? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of all the earth. He never grows weak or weary. No one can measure the depths of his understanding. He gives power to the weak. Strength to the powerless. Even youths will become weak and tired, and young men will fall in exhaustion. But those who trust in the Lord will find new strength. They will soar high on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not faint. How can a God so immense know what we're going through? It seems impossible that God would even notice us. Yet that's the power of the gospel. God came and chose to live with us, as one of us, to experience human troubles personally. He cares for us not just from a distance. Jesus came and he shed very real human tears, tears of grief at the death of his friend Lazarus. Tears of grief and empathy as he saw the heartbreak of Mary and Martha when their brother Lazarus had died. He felt the sting of rejection and betrayal. He suffered loneliness. And on the cross, he endured distress as he cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me? The God who is so far beyond us comes close to us. And he brings help and healing and restoration and wholeness. And it says that his power never wanes. We run out of power so quickly. You know, the world's gone through all sorts of energy crisis kind of thing. The need for power increases, and energy is transitioned from one source to another, from wood to coal to oil to renewables like solar and wind. And each stage we consume more and more power. But there's only one source of unending energy. It's the God of creation. And he's the one that promises to give us strength if we trust in him, if we wait on him. He strengthens those who trust. You know, there's this whole thing with electric vehicles that haven't caught on very well yet, and particularly in North America. Why? We don't trust that we're going to have the fuel we need when we need it. Be able to charge it when we want to, and be able to go on a long trip and get to the charging stations. And 25% of the population doesn't have a place where they can actually charge it at home within North America. And so it's like, yeah, and so there's a distrust of that. But there's a place we can trust for energy, for the strength we need. And that's trusting in the incredible, almighty God. So the question is this: how are you refueling your life when you're feeling weary or stressed or anxious, worn out, discouraged? Questions to consider. Okay, it doesn't want to click. There we go. Oh, no, it went too far. No, now it's going all the way there. Okay, let's... Jeremiah, if you can get me on that screen, that would be good to consider. What dominates your focus? What consumes your time? Do you have generous time in your schedule to listen to the voice of hope from the Spirit of God and from the Word of God? Or do you spend more time listening to the headlines of gloom from people who have disconnected from God? Where's your focus? And do you have a strategy to renew your strength? What are the strategies in your life that keep you connected to the God of strength, the God who gives renewed strength? Without a strategy to connect to God, you're going to be shaped by the disconnected world around us. The world that is disconnected from God, and because it's disconnected from God, is losing strength. And if you're shaped by that, you're going to be drained by disaster or the worry about what disaster might happen next. But God renews strength.